And to illustrate my point for this section, the first step in rebuilding your body is to evaluate your present situation. And that's what we're going to be doing this morning. Because if you don't know where you are, you don't know where you're going, and you don't know how far you've come once you start. So we're going to do something that's called the Krause-Weber test. It's a test for minimum muscular fitness of key posture muscles, and it measures the strength and flexibility of those key posture muscles. The muscles being the abdominals, the psoas, the abdominals and psoas combined, the upper back, the lower back, and then the flexibility of the back and hamstring muscles. So Lori and I are going to do the test while you watch, and then we'll talk about the history of it. It takes 90 seconds to give if you know what you're doing, which is a good thing, because when you have tests, there are several things against a lot of tests. They take too long. They take too long to correlate. They don't mean anything. Most people can't do them. This is a minimum test, so any healthy person should be able to pass it. So we're going to do the test first, and then I'll talk about the history. So she's going to just sit up once and roll down and bend the knees and roll up and roll down. You can see she's been practicing. And hold the legs out and count for 10 seconds, which I know she can do, so I'm not going to take the time. And turn over. Hands behind your neck. And come up and hold for another 10 seconds. And down. Go to sleep at this end. Raise the legs from the hips and hold for 10 seconds. And then stand on the floor. Feet together, knees straight, and bend over and see how close you can come to touch the floor. Okay, so let's do it again, and I'll just indicate the muscles that are being used as the test is being done. So this is with straight legs, it's a combination of the abdominals and the psoas muscle. Okay. When you bend the knees, it knocks out the psoas, and you come up on the abdominals. It's a truer abdominal test. This is the test for the psoas. The psoas starts in the low back, comes through the hip, and attaches to the top of the leg. And Lori will be talking about that this afternoon, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And turn over. Hands behind the neck and come up. This tests the upper back strength and lower back, and then back and hamstring flexibility. Okay? Now we're going to talk about it. The way this started was back in 1940. Dr. Sonia Weber and Dr. Hans Krause were at the posture clinic at Presbyterian Columbia Hospital in New York City. And what they noticed was that over a period of a few years, parents started bringing in their kids with poor posture, rounded shoulders, protruding abdominals, one shoulder up, scoliosis, that kind of thing. And what they found over a period of a couple of years of testing was that 80% of these people that came in did not have any muscle or spinal problems, no pathology at all. There were only 20% that actually had some pathology and a reason for not being able to do this. Because they were trained in Austria in the medical school, they learned much more about muscles than doctors here. So they said, maybe this is a muscle problem since it's not a spine problem. And so they did three things. They devised a test to measure the key posture muscles, which we just did. And then they defined the muscle fitness as the ability for these key posture muscles to carry you around all day. Those are the muscles that you use to stand upright and walk and go through your day. And then what they did was they devised a battery of corrective exercises, which we'll be doing later. So they did those three things. What they found was when the people did the exercises as prescribed, they no longer had the posture problems and they no longer had the pain. Over time, they then established what was called the back clinic, and that was in New York too. And after World War II, what they found was people started coming in with back pain, low back pain. And it was almost epidemic, according to them. So they used the same test and the same examinations and so forth on these people coming in with low back pain, and that's when they found that if you cannot do a sit-up, you have 50% chance of having low back pain. If you can't touch the floor, you have 50% chance of getting low back pain. If you can do neither of those, you probably have back pain or you're going to get it tomorrow. So then what happened was, enter Bonnie Prudden. In 1947, when her daughter was in 3rd grade at 8 years old, she noticed that she was getting a little paunchy and didn't seem to have the energy that she thought she had at her age. So she went to her daughter's 3rd grade gym class, which consisted of a circle game. And she was horrified because she had been brought up in the Turnverein, in the Russian ballet, she had some Finnish background, the Finnish hall, and the Sokol, the Swedish Sokol. So she had all of this background, plus she was an athlete. And she thought, also she was a dancer. She was a modern dancer on Broadway with the Weidman-Humphrey concert dance group. So she said to herself, I can do better than this. So she told her girls, who were 4 and 8 at the time, to invite 5 friends each, and they'd meet in the Girl Scout house and they'd exercise. And that night, two mothers called up of the girls and said they didn't want their daughters to exercise because they'd get muscles. That was in 1947. Bonnie said, under every curve is a muscle. No muscle, no curve. No curve, no husband. And she also changed her exercise class to conditioning because she said nobody knew what that was. So she held conditioning classes to music, which she developed her own method of exercise, the Prudden method of exercise, which you're using here. And within 6 weeks, there were 75 kids. And soon there were like 200 kids. So she kept having to move from place to place and asking the schools, can I use your gyms? Yes, you can use them if you accept every kid that wants to come. So at one point, she was 100 new students came into her class. And she thought, I really need to see if what I'm giving these kids is really working. So she said to her friend, Dr. Krauss, and the reason he was her friend was they were both rock climbers. And they met in 1938 in the Schwangunks. And Bonnie was a natural. And so Dr. Krauss told her that if she would climb exclusively with him, that he would mentor her and make her into a great rock climber, which he did. She was top woman rock climber in the world in the 40s and 50s. She has 31st descents in the Schwangunks, credited to her. So they were sitting on a ledge one day, and she said, do you have a test that I can use to test my kids that are all coming in to see how I'm doing? And he said, yeah, I have a test, but your kids will pass it because this was not designed for healthy kids. It was designed for kids that weren't healthy. But she said, well, I'll use it anyway. So she went back and she started testing the kids in her school. And what she found was that the kids coming in that hadn't had her class failed at 58%. of the test that you just saw here. The kids that had been with her only failed at 8%. And she said, if my testing is correct, America is in trouble. So she went back to Dr. Krause, and he said, you must be doing it wrong. She said, well, come over and find out for yourself. He did, and she wasn't doing it wrong. So he said, can you test a town? Can you test a school? Can you test? And so she did. She trained people to go with her and use this test on children from 6 to 16. And they tested over about 4,000 kids. And they came up with the same thing, 58% flunked. This simple test that was minimum. Then they thought, let's go to Austria and Italy and France and see what happens, and Switzerland. Because they climbed over there in the summer, they were over there anyway, and Dr. Krause knew a lot of people because that's where he was medically trained. And so they got permission to test the kids, and 8% flunked over there. So the same correlation that she found here with her kids and the kids that were just coming in was the same as over there. So what they did was they started writing medical papers. Nobody paid any attention. And they kept writing. And nobody paid any attention until finally John Kelly, who was Grace Kelly's father, saw an article in the Winged Foot, and he brought it to Eisenhower's attention. Now, Eisenhower knew what was going on because 50% of the people that were drafted for the Army couldn't pass. So it wasn't news to him that America was having a problem. On Monday, this coming Monday, will be the 60th year of when Bonnie received this letter. And she was known as Mrs. Hirschland at the time. That was her married name. And it's from the White House, June 29th, 1955. Dear Mrs. Hirschland, you undoubtedly know of the increasing concern that too many of our young people are spectators rather than active participants in athletic events. It has been suggested to me that at an informal luncheon meeting of representatives of the sports world, ways might be developed to counteract this trend and to induce young people to participate more actively in athletic sports. Thereby, the physical fitness of our American people would be improved and juvenile delinquency reduced. Would it be possible for you to attend such a luncheon that I am planning for Monday, July 11th at 12:30 at the White House? With best wishes, sincerely, Dwight Eisenhower. So, a few days later, she was at the White House with mostly, all but one were men from the sports world, like the boxers and baseball players and so forth. And as she said, those people didn't have the faintest idea about girls or anybody under 13. And she was right. So what she and Dr. Krause did was they presented their report to Eisenhower. And as she used to tell it, I was there sitting across the table from Eisenhower, and I was spitless. And I was certain that when I stood up, the chair was going to fall over. But what she did was she talked him through the test. Mr. President, if you were lying on the table and I held your feet down and I asked you to sit up once, could you do that? And he said yes. And so she talked him through it that way. And when she finished, he said, I'm shocked. And it became the report that shocked the president. And it was in every newspaper and on every radio program and everything that you can think of the next day. Following Bonnie's part of the report, Dr. Krause gave his report, which was what happens if you're inactive. And it's everything that you see today. So in 1955, the epidemic of low back pain, cardio problems, tension, high blood pressure, and diabetes and obesity were all reported at that meeting in 1955. and nobody listened. The academics fought over the test. They said that Bonnie and Krause were unpatriotic because they reported this, that the test was not American because it didn't have a ball throw in it and a running thing. But if you can't sit up once, how are you going to throw a ball or run? Or if you can't do the minimum, how are you going to do anything more? And so they devised a whole bunch of tests that became the president's whatever it's called, which what happened was 80% of the kids couldn't pass it because they were unprepared to pass it. They felt awful afterwards because they didn't pass it, and nobody helped them to pass it. It finally was abolished this year. And there have been articles recently online that tell about this.
This year now?
Yeah. Yeah. There was, I don't know if it's called Vox, is that what it is?
Yeah.
VOX. The guy gave a whole report on this test and what happened to it and the whole history of it. He got a few mistakes in there, but basically he got it right. And it is online. So that's what happened to Bonnie, and that's what happened to the test. And here we are today with everything that was predicted in 1955. So the reason that this test is important is that if you want to improve, you start here, and then you go from there.